Greetings gamers, today we're going to be working on a campaign template which is the perfect starting point for you to start planning out your RPG campaigns. Over the last few weeks, many of you have been asking me to share my OneNote notebook with you so that you can see how I arrange my campaign. And plenty of people have asked if I have a template for this. So what I've done is I've put together a template and filled it with everything I include in my own notebook to help you get started with your campaign planning for RPGs. Even if you don't use OneNote for campaign planning, this video will be super helpful because you'll be able to see the ways in which I separate out information and how I group everything together. So it should be really useful even if you're still using handwritten notes in a binder or if you use something like Google Docs. There's also a link down in the description below where you can download this template, and I'll also leave instructions on how you can get access to my campaign notebook so that you can see exactly what I do with this template. So without further ado, let's dive straight into it and open OneNote here. And you can see that inside this template, which I've already completed, you'll start off with a welcome page that's just letting you know what this is all about. And then on the left here, you can see that I've got a variety of sections. We're going to go through these one by one to give you an idea of what I would put in each of them. So we'll start with the world section. This is where you want to keep all the information about the world, your campaign world, in a general sense. So it'd be where you put your world map, information on natural wonders, mountain ranges, things like this would all go in here. It's also where you'd put the sort of introduction to your world. So the broad overview of your campaign setting, the central conflict. If you're starting with a big bad evil guy, here's where you'd sort of mention that. And this introduction to the world page is an ideal thing to hand to your players before the start of a campaign to sort of get them started in being familiar with the world. You can also see here that I have put pantheons into this world section. I'm going to be doing an entire video dedicated to how I go about creating deities and pantheons in the future, but I've put a little section with some example gods here just to give you an idea. The next section that I like to include in my campaign notes is for the players, and this is for me to track all of the players' information. I've talked a bit about this in a couple of the other previous videos, links down below, but I like to keep track of my players' stats and also their background, their history, their motivations, things that I can draw upon when I'm planning sessions, so that I can give them a more personalized experience. And included in this section, there is a template for how I organize my player sheets. Bear in mind, I run a homebrew Pathfinder campaign, so not all the things in here are going to be relevant to you, but you can chop and change and copy and paste what you need. This just gives you a layout, because I know a lot of people really liked how I was laying out my character sheets. So I've replicated that here with the template. And I've also given you an example here with Badar, who's one of the characters in the campaign I'm running at the moment, just so that you can see how I use the information. Next up, we have important NPCs. Now, most of the NPCs that I write for my campaign, I write them within a location. So you can see further down here, we've got a section for locations, and normally I will list all the NPCs in a city in the page for that city. But as certain NPCs become more prevalent and start recurring and following the party from place to place, I move them to their own section so I can have some more detailed information on them. And I treat them a little bit like how I treat player characters. So you can see in the template, I have information on their stats, their bonuses, their class and race, and I also have information for their attacks, just in case these NPCs need to be used in combat. And exactly the same as the character sheet, I use the description, background, motivation and fears, and additional information section, just so that I can write about the NPC characters. And I've given you an example of one of the important NPCs from my campaign in here as well. Next up, we have calendars. I've already talked quite a bit about how important I think calendars are to a dungeon master or game master, and I've included an entire section in this template for them. I use the calendar a lot in my game. During the session, I will go to the calendar day that the current session is taking place in, and then I make notes throughout the session in the calendar, and that's where I record what's happened in the session with brief notes, and then I go back to it and expand those notes a couple days after the session. It helps me keep track of where things have happened, when things have happened, and it allows me to plan for future events. So if my current session was on the 8th, I might know that in 10 days' time, an important event is going to happen. So I might mark that down if it comes up in the session. Say there's a tournament or something that's going to be taking place in 10 days, I'll put that there. Now, obviously, my example calendar uses the days from my homebrew game, but you can replace that with anything you like. Just using a simple table, you can add more columns if you like. The one I actually use in my game has columns for the stages of the moon, and it also has additional columns for the location that the sessions events are taking place in. Next up, I've included sections for both races and classes. What I like to do here is I will list all the races that my player characters play. So if I've got a 4-person party and they're playing 4 different races, I will go on to the online SRD, for example, and I'll copy the information for those 4 races as separate pages. So then if, for example, one of the players is playing as an elf and they want to know what the specific rules are for elven immunities, I don't need to go online to find that. I don't need to flip through my book. I can just click races, click on elves, and see the immunities listed. This is also really good if you run homebrew races. As I've mentioned before, I'm running a Pathfinder campaign, and Dragonborn don't exist in the Pathfinder system, so I'm using a modified version of the 3.5 Dragonborn in my game, so all the information on it is listed on this page. Similarly with classes, I will go on to the online SRD or perhaps a PDF of the core book or anywhere the information is kept, and I will just copy and paste all the information on the class onto the specific page, and I'll do this for each class that my players are playing. That way I know at a glance if one of the players says, "Oh, what do I get for going to level 10? Well, you're a fighter, so I look at the table, level 10, you get bravery +3, and then say you get bravery +3. Doing this with races and classes just cuts out a little bit of the searching. It means that you don't have to tab out, go to the internet, browse the internet. It means you've got it there available straight away. The next section that I've included is for mechanics, and how much or how little you use this section will depend on the kind of game you run, but this is where I put in all of my custom mechanics. So my game has a slight variant on healing rules, so I keep that there and keep track of how much HP people recover after certain lengths of rest. And I also have a page for drinking rules and how to handle drinking contests, because my players will quite often end up in a drinking contest. But this is where you would want to list any mechanical rules that you either make up or find online that aren't part of the core rules. So if your party, for example, are in quite a seedy city and there's going to be a lot of narcotics, well, you might want a section on how narcotics work in your world and a list of different drugs, what their prices are, what their effects are, how common they are, things like that. It's really handy to have a section for that, because then if for some reason you have to create a mechanic on the fly, say the party, for example, if they wanted to do a drinking contest and you didn't previously have the rules for it, you might make those rules up on the spot, but you can note them down here and then refine them and keep a note of them for later use. One of the most important sections in this notebook is the DM screen. I use this in almost exactly the same way as I would use a physical DM or GM screen, in that I list all the information that I want to have at a glance in separate pages. So one of the things that I always have to double check on is what constitutes certain actions, what counts as standard action, what counts as full round action, etc. So I have a page here where I've gone through and listed just about everything that the players might want to do, whether it's a standard move, what kind of action it is, and whether or not it provokes an attack of opportunity. For the combat, the miscellaneous, and the skills pages, all I've done there is taken the PDF of the Pathfinder core book that I have, and I've gone insert file, insert PDF printout, and put that in directly, because there's no point in spending the time to copy and paste and format all these tables when you can just take the entire page. And then I also have a page on common conditions in combat, because that comes up fairly often as well. But this section is where you would put anything that you find useful to have at a glance. So if you are fond of using random table generators for loot or NPC names, anything like that, you might create a page for generators and then fill this page with links to name generators and loot generators and Kobold Fight Club, things like that on this page. The next section I have included here is for factions. Normally I would include this in the world section, but I've separated it out into its own thing just so you can see it. Here is where I would list all the notable factions the players come across. So if there is a Thieves Guild in the starting city, I'd list that. If there is a renowned group of monster hunters, I'd list that. And the way I normally start is have a page for notable factions and then list them. So Thieves Guild, monster hunters, mercenary company, let's say. And if my party goes into the first town and hears vaguely about all these things, I'll list them there. And then as time goes on, if they hear about the Thieves Guild and learn that they operate in every city except one, I might make a note of that. As time goes on and the players learn more information about these guilds, or I start to write more information about these factions so that it becomes more than one or two sentences, then what I normally do is create a new page, for example, for the Thieves Guild, and I would list all of the information I have for that faction on that page. But to begin with, I always start by placing them in this top level page so that I've got them all at a glance. And then we move on to locations. Now, locations is probably going to be one of the densest sections in your notebook. I run my game by splitting every major location my party go to a separate page with its own sub-pages. And then I plan and run my sessions quite a lot from those pages. So, for example, my players are currently in the city of Sunhill in the Barony of Summerwood, and I'm in the process of writing out information about the city currently. So on this top level page, I have a description of the city, its districts, who the law is in the city, what's notable about the land around and in the city, and then a selection of rumours. For rumours, I always try and write them in groups that correspond to a dice roll, so in 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 20s, just so that when the players speak to someone about rumours, I can roll the corresponding dice and find out which rumour they see. Within each location, I'll have a map and on the map I will put small text boxes with pinned links. So for example, the bazaar here, I will link that to the section in the main page where I talk about the bazaar. So I'll have a section here within the city category where I talk about the bazaar being a large market filled with exotic goods, so that when I'm looking at the map, I can click on the section and immediately be taken to the information about it. I also list the NPCs in the city in a separate subpage, and the way I'm doing that at the moment is in a table, because I can put the name of the NPC, a description and information about them if they have particular motivations, etc. in another column, and then I can put in images of them, and the image will auto format to the right size. And that's just really handy for me to describe the NPCs. So if the party, when they first meet the Baron, Simon Vren, I have a picture, I might show that to the players, I might not. But either way, I've got a picture of him that I can use for my description. Another thing I like to do is I will make a note of whether the players have met a specific NPC. Now, the reason I do this is because the campaign world is quite vast, and it gets to the point where you might start to struggle to find artwork or names or characters to fulfill certain requirements that you have. So I mark whether or not the players have met a character, and if they haven't, for example, down here, Atholandi, the captain of the Sandhill Guard. If the players never meet her, I really like this piece of artwork, so I might want to use it again. If I know they've not met her, then the next city they go to, there might be a captain of the guard, and I can use that image, use her name, use any part of her that the players haven't met or heard of. And it just cuts down on a little bit of the work. It means that you're not having to start from scratch in every single city or location. And finally, within each location, I will also create a subpage for each session that I run in that city. So currently, my party are on session 45, and it is within this page that I would plan out everything that's going to happen in session 45, and I will leave a link in the description and in the card somewhere for you to see exactly how I plan out a session. And finally, the last element of the core of this template is initiative, because I know a lot of people want to know how I would use OneNote to track initiative. This is what I would do. I have a section for initiative and then a separate page for each participant of the combat. What you do with the pages is up to you. You could just leave them blank and just use them as named pages to drag the order, or you could link, if it was a player for example, you could link to that player's information. Or what you might want to do is go to the player page and move copy the actual player sheet into the initiative order, so that when you click on that player whose initiative it is, you see all their information right there. That's what I like to do. I want to see everything in one place without having to click to several places. And then I would also do a similar thing for the NPCs, for the monsters in the fight. So if, for example, they were fighting a bugbear, I would go to the bugbears page of the SRD, or in a bestiary or monster manual PDF or what have you, wherever the information is, I'd copy and paste that information directly onto the monster's initiative, just so that I have it all there, so that when they're running the combat, I can run the combat from my side within this initiative block. I don't have to go clicking around. For any creatures that I'm running multiples of, I just have them all go at the same initiative, just to speed up combat. I roll monster initiatives before the session, just to speed things up that little bit more. And then if there were 3 goblins, I'd put all 3 goblins on the same initiative, on the same page, and then I might, in the HP, just list it as 666, so that I know there were 3 goblins, and then as they take wounds, I might change that and say, right, okay, you've injured Goblin 2 and 3, and when they kill Goblin 2, change it to 0, so that I know it's specifically Goblin 3 that's been killed. And I do this for all the monsters involved in the combat and all the players, because I like to have all that information there while I'm running the combat. So I hope you've found this video useful, and as I said, you can download the blank version of this template in the description below, and then you can use that to build your own campaign worlds. If you'd like to see how I have planned out my own campaign world, there's instructions on how to do that in the description below. And if you've enjoyed this video and find the template useful, please give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe. But until next time, happy gaming. Thanks for watching. If you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button down below for new content every single Friday. And if you want to keep watching, well, there's another couple videos for you to watch just over there. Happy gaming.